The morning sun barely pierced through the grimy windows of Maggie's Diner, a small roadside establishment just outside Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The place had seen better days, cracked vinyl booths, faded checkered floors, and a bell above the door that hadn't rung properly in years. But it was honest work, and Sarah Chen needed honest work right now. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her ponytail swaying as she refilled coffee cups and cleared plates. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet discipline that most people missed. They saw only a tired waitress in a stained apron. They didn't see the former army medic who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. They didn't see the tremor in her left hand, a reminder of the IED that had ended her military career 8 months ago. Sarah had saved 3 lives that day. She had lost her team leader, and she had come home to a country that seemed to have forgotten what sacrifice meant. The bell above the door gave its broken clatter as a couple walked in. Sarah glanced up and immediately recognized the type. The woman wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, her highlighted hair styled in perfect waves. The man beside her had the look of inherited wealth, soft hands, expensive watch, and an expression that suggested the world existed to serve him. They chose the booth by the window and sat down without acknowledging Sarah's greeting. She approached with menus and her practiced smile. "Good morning. Can I start you folks with some coffee?" The woman looked up, her eyes scanning Sarah with barely concealed disdain. "Is it fresh?" "Made it 20 minutes ago, ma'am." "Fine," the word came out like a dismissal. Sarah poured carefully, her left hand steady through sheer force of will. The tremor was worst in the mornings, but she had learned to compensate. She set down the cups and pulled out her order pad. "Do you need a few minutes, or—" "Obviously we need time," the man interrupted, not looking up from his phone. "We'll call you when we're ready." Sarah nodded and stepped back, retreating to the counter where old Pete, the cook, was flipping eggs. He caught her eye and shook his head. In his 70 years, Pete had seen every kind of customer, and he could spot trouble a mile away. 10 minutes passed. 15. The couple whispered to each other, occasionally laughing at something on the man's phone. Sarah checked on her other tables, a trucker reading a newspaper, a young couple with a baby, an elderly woman eating oatmeal in the corner booth. Finally, the man snapped his fingers, actually snapped them like Sarah was a dog. She walked over, order pad ready. "We'll have the eggs Benedict," the woman said. "But I want the hollandaise on the side, and make sure the eggs are poached properly. Last time we were here, they were overcooked." Sarah paused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is my first time seeing you here." The woman's face hardened. "Are you calling me a liar?" "No, ma'am, I just take the order," the man cut in. "And I'll have the steak and eggs, steak rare, very rare. If it's even slightly overcooked, we're sending it back." Sarah wrote it down, her hand cramping slightly. "And how would you like your eggs?" "Sunny side up. Is that too complicated for you?" The insult hung in the air. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came when she remembered being valued, being trusted with lives, being more than invisible. "No, sir, I'll get this right in for you." She turned and walked to the kitchen where Pete was already shaking his head. "Heard all that," he muttered. "Want me to spit in their food?" Sarah almost smiled. "Just make it good, Pete. I need this job." The food came out perfect 15 minutes later. Pete had been cooking since before Sarah was born, and he took pride in every plate. Sarah carried the dishes carefully, setting them down with practiced grace. "Eggs Benedict, hollandaise on the side, and steak and eggs, steak rare." The man cut into his steak immediately. Red juice pooled on the plate. He took a bite, chewed once, and spat it onto his plate. "This is raw." Sarah blinked. "Sir, you asked for very rare." "I asked for rare. This is inedible." He shoved the plate toward her and the juice splashed onto the table. "Take it back." The woman picked at her eggs with her fork, then pushed her plate away as well. "These eggs are cold. How hard is it to serve hot food?" Sarah felt the heat rising in her face. The eggs had come straight from the kitchen. They were perfectly warm, but she kept her voice level. "I'm sorry you're not satisfied. Let me get Pete too." "Pete," the man laughed. "Is that the old man in the back? Maybe you should hire someone who knows how to cook." "Sir, Pete's been cooking for 40 years. "Then he should retire." The man leaned back, his face twisted with cant. "MPT, you know what your problem is? You people don't understand service. You think showing up is enough. Well, it's not. You people, the words hit Sarah like a slap. She had heard those words before in different contexts from different mouths, but always carrying the same poison. She took a breath. I'll have the kitchen remake both dishes. No, the woman stood up suddenly. We're not waiting. We're done with this pathetic excuse for a restaurant. Ma'am, please. The woman grabbed Sarah's wrist, her manicured nails digging into skin. Don't touch me. I didn't. You did, I felt it. The woman's voice rose, theatrical and sharp. She assaulted me, Richard. This waitress just grabbed my arm. The diner had gone quiet. Every customer was watching now. Sarah tried to pull her hand back gently. Ma'am, please let go of me. You don't tell me what to do. The woman's grip tightened, and suddenly she jerked Sarah forward hard enough that Sarah stumbled. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. The man stood up, his face red with manufactured outrage. You're attacking my wife. I'm not. He grabbed Sarah's shoulder and shoved her backward. Her hip hit the edge of the table, pain shooting through her side. She tried to catch herself, but her left hand, the damaged one, gave out, and she went down hard, her head cracking against the corner of the booth. The world tilted. Stars burst across her vision. She heard Pete shouting, heard chairs scraping, heard the woman's voice high and indignant. Did you see that? She attacked us. Someone call the police. Sarah tried to push herself up, but her left arm wouldn't cooperate. Blood trickled down her temple, warm and sticky. Through her blurred vision, she saw the couple standing over her, the man already on his phone, the woman's face a mask of false horror. Then the bell above the door clanged. Footsteps heavy and deliberate crossed the diner floor. And a voice, calm but carrying absolute authority, cut through the chaos. Nobody moves. Through the ringing in her ears and the swimming darkness at the edges of her vision, Sarah heard a sound that cut through everything else. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate in her chest. She blinked, trying to clear her eyes, and saw boots. Military boots, worn but well-maintained, the kind that had seen real miles in hard places. Her gaze traveled up dark tactical pants, a plain black jacket, and then a face that commanded attention without trying. The man was maybe 35, with a weathered tan and eyes that missed nothing. His jaw was set, his stance balanced, and everything about him screamed operator. Beside him sat the source of the growl. The dog was a Belgian Malinois, lean and muscular, with intelligent brown eyes and ears perked forward. Its attention was locked on the couple, and every line of its body spoke of controlled violence held in check. The dog wore a tactical harness with patches Sarah recognized immediately, Navy Special Operations Command. The man's eyes swept the scene in seconds, reading it the way Sarah had been trained to read casualty situations. His gaze lingered on her for a moment, on the blood trickling down her face, the way she cradled her left arm, the position of her body relative to the table. Then he looked at the couple. I said nobody moves. His voice was quieter this time, but somehow more dangerous for it. The man, Richard, straightened, his face shifting to indignation. This doesn't concern you. This waitress attacked my wife and we're pressing charges. Is that so? The operator's expression didn't change. Thor, watch. The Malinois moved instantly, positioning itself between Sarah and the couple. Its growl deepened, and its lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. The woman took a step back, her manufactured courage faltering. The operator knelt beside Sarah, his movements careful and professional. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, Naval Special Warfare Command. Can you hear me? Sarah nodded, her head pounding. Yes, sir. Good, stay still. You hit your head pretty hard. His hand came up and she flinched involuntarily before she could stop herself. He noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly, but his voice remained gentle. I'm just going to check your pupils, that okay? She nodded again and he examined her quickly and efficiently. His hands were steady, his touch clinical but not impersonal. Sarah recognized the assessment, checking for concussion, for serious injury, for anything that needed immediate attention. You're going to be okay, he said finally. Probably have a headache for a few days, but I don't think you're concussed. You a veteran. The question surprised her. How did you? The way you tracked Thor when we came in, the way you're breathing through the pain, and these. He gestured to the dog tags she wore under her shirt. She hadn't realized they'd sly. Peeped out when she fell. Army, she said quietly. 68W discharged 8 months ago. Combat medic, understanding flickered across his face. Let me guess, downrange injury. She didn't answer, but her left hand clenched involuntarily, and that was answer enough. Morrison stood, his expression hardening as he turned back to the couple. So let me make sure I understand. You assaulted a disabled veteran in her place of work. She attacked us first, the woman insisted, but her voice had lost its edge. She grabbed my arm. Ma'am, I've been doing this a long time. I know what an assault looks like, and I know what self-defense looks like. And what I see here is a woman with blood on her face and a couple with not a scratch on them. He pulled out his phone. Thor, guard position. The dog moved again, sitting directly in front of the couple, its attention absolute. They couldn't leave without going through the Malinois, and from the terror in their eyes, they knew it. Morrison stepped back toward the kitchen, and Sarah heard him talking in low tones. She tried to sit up, and Pete appeared beside her, his weathered face creased with worry. Easy girl, don't move too fast. I'm okay, Pete. The hell you are? That bastard slammed you into the table. The old cook's hands shook as he pressed a clean towel to her temple. I saw the whole thing, so did everyone else here. Sarah looked around. The trucker was standing now, his phone out. The young couple with the baby looked horrified. Even the elderly woman had come over, her face set with determination. Morrison came back, his phone to his ear. Yeah, Sheriff, it's Morrison. I'm at Maggie's Diner on Route 87. I need you here now. I've got an assault in progress. No, it's not one of mine. It's a civilian assault on a veteran. Yeah, I'll hold the scene. He ended the call and looked at the couple. Sheriff's on his way. You two are going to stay right where you are. You can't detain us, Richard blustered. We haven't done anything wrong. Actually, I can. I'm a federal law enforcement officer when necessary, and right now, I'm witnessing the aftermath of an assault. So you're going to sit down, be quiet, and wait for the sheriff. Morrison's voice never rose, but something in his tone made Richard sit down immediately. Sarah managed to pull herself into a sitting position, her back against the booth. The bleeding from her temple had slowed, but everything hurt. Morrison crouched beside her again. The sheriff's a friend, good guy. He'll take your statement, and these two will answer for what they did. They'll just lie, Sarah said quietly. They'll say it was my fault, and they'll probably get away with it. People like them always do. Morrison studied her for a long moment. What's your name? Sarah Chen. Well, Sarah Chen, I've spent 15 years making sure people who hurt others don't get away with it, and I'm not about to start making exceptions now. He glanced at Thor, who was still locked onto the couple. Besides, you've got witnesses, including me. The diner door opened, and a man in a sheriff's uniform walked in, tall, early 50s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life in service. His eyes went to Morrison first, then to Sarah, then to the couple and the very alert military working dog sitting between them. Jake, he said, what have we got? Morrison stood. Hey, Tom, got a situation, these two. He gestured to the couple, assaulted this veteran when she was trying to do her job. She's got a head wound, and I've got multiple witnesses who saw the whole thing. Sheriff Tom Rodriguez knelt beside Sarah, his expression gentle. Miss, I'm Sheriff Rodriguez. Can you tell me what happened? Sarah took a breath and told the story, keeping her voice steady despite the throbbing in her head. She didn't embellish, didn't editorialize, just the facts, the way she'd been trained. When she finished, Rodriguez stood and looked at the couple. That your version? She's lying, the woman said quickly. She grabbed me first. Pete, Rodriguez called to the kitchen. The old cook came out, wiping his hands on his apron. I saw everything, Tom. That girl didn't touch anyone. The lady grabbed Sarah's wrist, then the man shoved her into the table. Deliberate, mean, and everyone in here saw it. Rodriguez looked around. The trucker nodded. The young couple nodded. The elderly woman spoke up, her voice firm. I've been coming to this diner for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone work harder or more respectfully than that young lady. These two treated her like garbage from the moment they walked in. The color drained from Richard's face. The woman's mouth opened and closed. Rodriguez pulled out his handcuffs. Richard and Catherine Thornton, you're both under arrest for assault and battery. This is ridiculous, Richard stood, his face flushing. Do you know who? I am, my father is. I don't care if your father is the president, Rodriguez said calmly. You assaulted someone. That's a crime in North Carolina, regardless of who your daddy is. As Rodriguez read them their rights and cuffed them, Morrison helped Sarah to her feet. Her legs were shaky, but she stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. You're going to need to go to the hospital, get checked out, and you're going to need to file a formal report." "I can't afford." "VA hospital's 20 minutes from here. You're a veteran with a service-connected injury. It's free." He paused. "And for what it's worth, you handled that with more dignity than most people could have managed." Thor pressed against Sarah's leg, warm and solid. She reached down instinctively, her fingers finding the soft fur behind the dog's ears. Thor leaned into the touch, and for the first time since she'd fallen, Sarah felt some of the tension leave her body. Morrison noticed. "He likes you. Thor doesn't like many people." "He's a good dog." "The best." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this isn't easy, but you did nothing wrong here. These people hurt you because they could, because they thought you didn't matter, but you do matter, and they're going to learn that." As Rodriguez walked the Thorntons out in handcuffs, the woman sobbing, the man still protesting, Sarah watched through the diner window. She felt Pete's hand on her shoulder, felt the presence of the other customers who had stood up for her, felt the warm weight of Thor against her leg. And for the first time in 8 months, Sarah Chen felt like maybe she wasn't as invisible as she'd thought. The VA hospital exam room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Sarah sat on the paper-covered table while a tired-looking doctor checked her vitals and examined the cut on her temple. Morrison had insisted on driving her, with Thor settled calmly in the back of his truck. Now the Malinois lay by the exam room door, alert but relaxed. "You're lucky," Dr. Patel said, applying butterfly bandages. "Could have been a lot worse, but I want you to watch for signs of concussion, nausea, vision problems, confusion. If you experience any of those, come back immediately." "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Patel glanced at Sarah's medical file on her computer screen, and her expression softened. "I see you're service-connected for left arm nerve damage. How's that been?" Sarah flexed her hand, the tremor barely visible now. "Some days better than others." "Are you doing your physical therapy?" "When I can afford it." The doctor's lips pressed together, but she didn't lecture. Instead, she pulled out a card. "There's a veteran support group that meets here every Thursday evening. Physical therapy, counseling, job assistance. Might be worth checking out." Sarah took the card, knowing she probably wouldn't go. She'd tried groups before. Sitting in circles, talking about feelings, listening to people who seemed to have their lives together while she was serving eggs and coffee just to make rent. "I'll think about it." Morrison was waiting in the lobby when she finished, Thor sitting alertly at his side. He stood as she approached. "How bad?" "I'll live. Doc says I'm lucky." "Lucky's relative." He gestured toward the exit. "Come on, I'll drive you home." "You don't have to." "Sarah," he said her name firmly, the way officers did when they weren't making suggestions. "Let me drive you home." She followed him to his truck, a well-maintained Ford F-150 with a tonneau cover and a small Naval Special Warfare Command sticker in the corner of the rear window. Thor jumped into the extended cab with practiced ease, and Sarah climbed into the passenger seat, her body aching. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the North Carolina countryside rolling past. Small houses, pine forests, the occasional strip mall. It was beautiful in a quiet way, but Sarah barely saw it. Her mind was replaying the morning, the feel of Richard's hand shoving her, the crack of her head against the booth. "You're thinking too much," Morrison said. Sarah glanced at him. "How would you know?" "Your jaw's tight, your breathing's shallow, and you're gripping the door handle like it's the only thing keeping you here." He kept his eyes on the road. "I've seen that look before, on my guys after a bad op, on civilians after an attack, on myself in the mirror more times than I can count." "I'm fine." "No, you're not, and that's okay." He paused. "What happened to your arm?" The question was direct, but not unkind. Sarah found herself answering before she could think better of it. "IED outside Kandahar. We were on patrol. I was with a civil affairs team doing medical outreach in a village. Someone tipped off the Taliban." Her voice was flat, clinical. "The blast hit our lead vehicle. 3 wounded, 1 KIA. I was pulling a casualty when the on device went off. Shrapnel severed some nerves in my left arm. They patched me up at Bagram, flew me to Landstuhl, then Walter Reed." "Your team leader?" Sarah nodded. "Sergeant Marcus Williams, good man, had a wife and 2 kids." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They turned onto a smaller road and Sarah directed him toward her apartment, a rundown complex on the outskirts of town. The paint was peeling, the parking lot was cracked, and half the security lights were burned out. Morrison pulled into a visitor spot and killed the engine. He didn't say anything about the neighborhood, which Sarah appreciated. Instead, he turned to face her. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you working at a diner? Sarah bristled. It's honest work. That's not what I meant. Morrison's voice was gentle. You're a combat medic with 2 tours. You've got training and experience. You could be working at a hospital, at a clinic, making real money and using your skills. So why aren't you? The question hit harder than she expected. Sarah looked down at her left hand, at the way it trembled slightly even when she tried to hold it still. They don't want a medic who can't hold instruments steady. They don't want someone who might freeze up when things get loud. They don't want. She trailed off, then forced herself to continue. They don't want someone broken. You're not broken. You don't know me. I know enough. Morrison leaned back. I know you held it together when those people were attacking you. I know you tried to de-escalate instead of fighting back. I know you've got the discipline to work a job that's beneath your skill level without complaining. That's not broken, that's professional. Thor whined softly from the back seat, and Morrison reached back to scratch the dog's head. You know what Thor's story is? Sarah shook her head. Found him at a shelter when he was 8 months old. Someone had abandoned him and he was half-starved, covered in scars from fighting. The shelter thought he was too aggressive to adopt, but I saw something else. I saw a dog who'd been hurt, who'd learned to defend himself, who needed someone to give him a chance. Morrison smiled slightly. Took him home, spent 6 months training him. Now he's the best partner I've ever had, saved my life twice and more lives than I can count. What's your point? My point is that being hurt doesn't make you worthless. It makes you experienced, and experience is valuable if you know how to use it. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to point out that a dog wasn't the same as a person, that his story didn't apply to her situation. But something in Morrison's voice stopped her. He wasn't preaching. He was speaking from a place of understanding. I should go, she said finally. Morrison nodded and got out, coming around to open her door. Thor hopped down and stretched, his tail wagging slowly. Sarah, Morrison waited until she looked at him. What happened today wasn't your fault, you know that, right? I know. Do you? Because I've seen that look too. That look that says maybe if you'd just been better, faster, quieter, it wouldn't have happened. That look that says you deserved it somehow. His voice was firm. You didn't. Those people attacked you because they're cruel and they thought they could, not because of anything you did or didn't do. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd been holding up for months. They're right, though. I'm not what I was. I can't do what I used to do. You're adapting. That's what soldiers do. We adapt, we overcome, we move forward. Morrison pulled out a card and handed it to her. This is my number. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me, day or night. Sarah took the card, her throat tight. Why are you helping me? Morrison looked at her for a long moment, and something passed across his face. Memory, pain, understanding. Because someone helped me once when I needed it. And because you remind me of every soldier I've ever served with who came home and thought they didn't matter anymore. You matter, Sarah. Don't forget that. He got back in his truck, Thor jumping in beside him, and drove away. Sarah stood in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear, the card heavy in her hand. Inside her apartment, a small studio with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting, Sarah finally let herself sit down. The adrenaline was wearing off and everything hurt. Her head throbbed, her hip ached, her left arm was cramping. But Morrison's words kept echoing in her mind. You matter. She looked at the card in her hand. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, Naval Special Warfare Command. A personal cell number written in neat block letters. Sarah set the card on her small kitchen counter, next to the flyer for the Veterans Support Group Dr. Patel had given. Then she went to her bedroom, lay down fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion pulled her under. 3 days later, Sarah stood outside the district courthouse, her stomach tight with anxiety. Her left hand was trembling badly, stress always made it worse, and she kept it buried in her jacket pocket. The morning was cold, the sky gray and threatening rain. Morrison had called her twice to make sure she was coming. She'd almost told him not to bother, that she didn't want to face the Thorntons again, that it wasn't worth it. But something in his voice, a quiet insistence that this mattered, had made her agree. Now she was starting to regret it. The courthouse doors opened, and Morrison emerged with Thor at his side. The Malinois was wearing his full tactical harness today, official and imposing. Morrison was in his dress uniform, the dark blue jacket with rows of ribbons, the crisp white shirt, the insignia that marked him as someone who'd earned his place through blood and sacrifice. He looked like someone people listened to. Sarah, in her thrift store slacks and borrowed blazer, felt small by comparison. "You came," Morrison said, something like relief in his voice. "You didn't give me much choice." "Sure I did. You could have stayed home, let them walk, told yourself it didn't matter." He studied her face. "But you're here, that takes courage." "I don't feel very courageous." "Courage isn't feeling fearless, it's being scared and showing up anyway." He gestured toward the entrance. "Come on, Sheriff Rodriguez is already inside, and so is the prosecutor." The courtroom was smaller than Sarah expected, wood-paneled and formal, with rows of benches and a judge's seat at the front. The Thorntons were already there with their lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked expensive. Catherine was wearing a modest dress and pearls, her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the woman who'd grabbed Sarah's wrist in the diner. Richard sat beside her in a suit, his expression carefully neutral. They were playing the part of respectable citizens wronged by the system. Sheriff Rodriguez sat on the prosecution side, along with a woman in her 40s wearing a gray pantsuit. The assistant district attorney, Sarah guessed. Morrison guided Sarah to a bench behind them, Thor settling at his feet. "All rise," the bailiff called, and everyone stood as Judge Patricia Hendricks entered. She was a black woman in her 60s with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat, gestured for everyone else to do the same, and opened the file in front of her. Case number 24 CR 1847, State of North Carolina versus Richard Thornton and Catherine Thornton, charges of assault and battery. How do the defendants plead? The expensive lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My clients are victims of a misunderstanding and look forward to proving their innocence." Judge Hendricks looked unimpressed. "Noted, Ms. Patterson, what's the state's position?" The ADA stood. "Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of assault. The defendants verbally harassed and physically attacked Ms. Sarah Chen while she was working as a waitress. We have multiple eyewitnesses, including a decorated Navy SEAL commander who witnessed the aftermath. We're asking for bail to be set at $50,000 each." The defense lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, that's excessive. My clients are prominent members of the community with no prior criminal record. They pose no flight risk. We ask for release on their own recognizance." "Prominent?" Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, I don't care if your clients are the Queen of England. They're charged with assault. Ms. Patterson, call your first witness." The state calls Sheriff Tom Rodriguez. Rodriguez took the stand, was sworn in, and gave his testimony in clear professional language. He described the scene he'd found, Sarah bleeding, the Thorntons unharmed, the multiple witnesses who'd all told the same story. The defense lawyer tried to poke holes in his testimony, but Rodriguez didn't budge. "Sheriff, isn't it possible that Ms. Chen instigated this altercation, and the Thorntons were simply defending themselves?" "No, sir. Based on the witness statements and the physical evidence, Ms. Chen was the victim of an unprovoked attack." "But you didn't witness the initial contact." "I didn't need to. When you've been in law enforcement as long as I have, you learn to read a scene, and this scene was clear." Next came Pete, who testified about watching the whole thing from the kitchen. Then the trucker, the young couple, the elderly woman. Each one told the same story, with small differences in detail but absolute consistency on the core facts. The Thorntons had attacked Sarah without provocation. Finally, the ADA called Morrison. He stood, Thor rising with him, and walked to the witness stand with the bearing of someone who'd testify. Before, he was sworn in, gave his name and rank, and waited. "Commander Morrison, please tell the court what you observed on the morning of December 7th. Morrison's voice was calm and precise as he described walking into the diner, seeing Sarah on the floor bleeding, the Thorntons standing over her. He described the positions of the bodies, the lack of injuries on the Thorntons, the fear and pain in Sarah's eyes. "And what was your professional assessment of the situation?" the ADA asked. That I was looking at the aftermath of an assault. Ms. Chen had been attacked, and her attackers were attempting to blame her for their actions. The defense lawyer stood for cross-examination. Commander Morrison, you didn't actually witness the assault, did you? No, sir. So you're speculating about what happened based on what you saw after the fact. I'm drawing conclusions based on 15 years of experience reading combat situations and crime scenes. I know what defensive injuries look like, and I know what aggressive injuries look like. Ms. Chen had aggressive injuries. But couldn't those injuries have occurred because Ms. Chen attacked my clients first? Morrison's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. No, sir. If Ms. Chen had attacked your clients, they would have defensive wounds, scratches, bruises, something. They had nothing. And if your clients were defending themselves, Ms. Chen would have different injury patterns. What I saw was consistent with someone being shoved into furniture by a larger, stronger assailant. You seem very certain. I am certain. I've seen enough violence in my career to know the difference between an attack and self-defense. The lawyer tried a few more questions, but Morrison didn't give an inch. Finally, he was dismissed, and the Ada stood again. Your Honor, the state calls Sarah Chen. Sarah's legs felt weak as she stood. She walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and sat down, very aware of everyone watching her. The Thorntons stared at her with cold hatred. Their lawyer looked smug. The Ada approached gently. Ms. Chen, can you tell the court what happened on the morning of December 7th? Sarah took a breath and told the story again. She kept her voice steady, her hands folded in her lap to hide the tremor. She described the Thorntons' behavior from the moment they entered, their rudeness, the escalation, the physical assault. And during all of this, did you ever touch either of the defendants? No, ma'am, not until Mrs. Thornton grabbed my wrist. What did you do when she grabbed you? I tried to pull away gently. I asked her to let go. Did you hit her, push her, threaten her? No, ma'am. The defense lawyer's cross-examination was brutal. He implied Sarah was lying, suggested she'd provoked the Thorntons, questioned why she hadn't simply walked away. He brought up her military discharge, her PTSD diagnosis, her current employment situation. Isn't it true, Ms. Chen, that you have a documented history of anxiety and emotional instability? Sarah felt her face flush. I have PTSD from my military service, yes. And isn't it possible that your PTSD caused you to misinterpret my client's actions? Perhaps you felt threatened when no threat existed. No, sir, I know what happened. But you admit you have a condition that affects your perception. Objection, the Ada snapped. Counsel is mischaracterizing PTSD and harassing the witness. Sustained, Judge Hendricks leaned forward. Counselor, tread carefully. But the damage was done. Sarah could see it in the faces of the people in the courtroom, the doubt creeping in, the questions forming. Maybe she was unstable, maybe she had misunderstood, maybe. Ms. Chen, the defense lawyer's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. Isn't it true that you're facing financial difficulties, that you're struggling to pay your rent to afford medical care? Yes, sir. And isn't it possible that you saw an opportunity here? That you saw wealthy clients and thought, perhaps, that you could claim they hurt you and seek compensation? The accusation hung in the air, ugly and calculated. Sarah felt something break inside her, not despair but anger. Clean, righteous anger. She looked directly at the lawyer. No, sir, I'm not trying to get money from anyone. I'm trying to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else. Because people like your clients think they can hurt people like me and get away with it. And for a long time, they've been right. Her voice was shaking now, but not with fear. I served my country. I saved lives. I got hurt doing it, and I came home to find out that the country I served doesn't always care about people like me. But I still believe in justice. I still believe that when someone does wrong, they should be held accountable. So no, I'm not after money. I'm after the truth. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hendricks looked at Sarah for a long moment, then at the Thorntons, then at the defense lawyer. Anything else, counselor? No, your honors. Then sit down. The judge turned to the Ada. Redirect. No, your honor. Ms. Chen's testimony speaks for itself. Judge Hendricks reviewed her notes, the silence stretching. Finally, she looked up. I've heard enough. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I find probable cause to believe that the defendants committed assault and battery against Ms. Chen. Bail is set at $50,000 each, and this case will proceed to trial. She pointed her gavel at the Thorntons. You two should be ashamed of yourselves. Assaulting a veteran who was simply trying to do her job? Disgraceful. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Sarah stood outside the courthouse in the weak December sunshine, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and relief. Morrison appeared beside her, Thor at his heel, and pressed a bottle of water into her hands. You did good in there, he said quietly. I don't feel like I did good. I feel like I barely held it together. That's what good looks like sometimes, holding it together when everything in you wants to fall apart. He glanced back at the courthouse where the Thorntons were being processed for bail. They'll probably plead out. Their lawyer knows they'd lose at trial with all those witnesses, but even if they get a light sentence, they'll have records now. They'll think twice before they hurt someone else. Sarah took a shaky sip of water. That lawyer tried to make me look crazy, like my PTSD means I can't tell what's real. Yeah, he did, and you shut him down beautifully. Morrison's voice was firm. Don't let anyone use your service against you, Sarah. Your PTSD doesn't make you weak or unreliable. It makes you human. It means you experience things that would break most people and you're still standing. Thor pressed against Sarah's leg, warm and solid, and she found her hand moving automatically to scratch behind his ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his tail wagging slowly. He's been doing that a lot around you, Morrison observed. That's his comfort behavior. He usually reserves it for wounded soldiers. I'm not wounded, not anymore. Physical wounds aren't the only kind that matter. Morrison was quiet for a moment. You know what Thor's job is besides the tactical stuff? He's a therapy dog too. We visit VA hospitals, work with vets who are struggling. And you know what I've learned doing that? Sarah shook her head. That the strongest people are often the ones who are hurting the most. Because they've learned to carry pain and keep moving. That's you, Sarah. You're carrying a load that would crush most people, and you're still showing up, still trying, still believing that things can be better. He paused. That's not weakness, that's strength. Sarah felt her throat tighten. I don't feel strong, I feel like I'm barely surviving. Surviving is what you do until you figure out how to live again. Morrison pulled out his phone. I'm going to tell you something and I want you to really hear it. You're not alone in this. There are resources, people who want to help. That veterans support group Dr. Patel told you about, I help run it. And we've got job placement services, therapy, physical rehabilitation. Real help, not just talk. I can't afford. It's free, funded by grants and donations. All you have to do is show up. He held her gaze. And I know showing up is the hardest part. I know that when you're in the hole, climbing out feels impossible. But I'm telling you, Sarah, it's not. You just need to take the first step. Sarah looked down at Thor, at the intelligent brown eyes watching her with something that looked almost like understanding. She thought about Sergeant Williams, about the way he'd always told his team that they were stronger together than apart. She thought about the promise she'd made at his funeral, that she'd keep going, keep fighting, keep living the life he couldn't. When does the group meet? She asked quietly. Morrison's expression softened. Thursday night, 7 o'clock at the VA hospital. I'll pick you up if you want. I can drive myself. Okay, but I'm texting you the address right now, and I'm going to check in Thursday afternoon to make sure you're coming. He smiled slightly. I'm persistent. Ask anyone in my unit. Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. I'm starting to see that. They stood in silence for a moment, watching traffic pass on the street, the normal world continuing around them. Sarah felt the water bottle cold in her good hand, felt the warmth of Thor against her leg, felt the steady presence of Morrison beside her. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why do you care? You don't know me. You could have just walked away after you helped at the diner. Morrison considered the question. 5 years ago, I came back from a bad deployment. Real bad. Lost 3 guys in an ambush, and I was the one who made the call that put us there. I came home and I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function. I thought about eating my gun more than once. Sarah's breath caught. But then this crusty old master chief who'd been where I was, he showed up at my door one day. Didn't ask permission, didn't wait for an invitation. Just said, get your shoes on, we're going for a walk. And we walked, and he talked, and he listened. And slowly, over months, he helped me find my way back. Morrison looked at her. Before he died last year, I asked him why he'd helped me. You know what he said? He said, because someone helped me once and the only way to pay that back is to pay it forward. So that's what I'm doing, Sarah. I'm paying it forward. And someday, when you're back on your feet, you'll pay it forward too. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know if I can. You can and you will. He checked his watch. I need to get back to base and you need to rest, but I'm serious about Thursday, and I'm serious about that number I gave you. Day or night, you need something, you call. Why do you keep saying that? Because I mean it. Morrison's voice was absolutely steady. The military teaches us to never leave anyone behind. That doesn't stop just because we're stateside. You're a soldier who needs backup and I'm providing it. That's what we do. He whistled softly and Thor moved to his side. They walked toward his truck, then Morrison paused and turned back. Sarah, you matter. Don't ever forget that. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah standing in the courthouse parking lot with tears running down her face and something warm blooming in her chest that might have been hope. Thursday evening came faster than Sarah expected. She almost didn't go, got as far as sitting in her car in the VA hospital parking lot, her hand on the keys, ready to drive away. But Morrison's words kept echoing in her head. You matter, the first step. She got out of the car and walked inside. The Veterans Support Group met in a large room on the second floor. There were about 15 people there, men and women of different ages, different branches, different wars. Some looked put together, others looked as rough as Sarah felt. Morrison was at the front with Thor, talking to a woman with a prosthetic leg. He saw Sarah and smiled, waving her over. Thor's tail started wagging. You came, Morrison said, and the pride in his voice made Sarah's throat tight. I almost didn't. Almost doesn't count, you're here, he gestured to the group. Everyone, this is Sarah Chen, Army medic, Afghanistan veteran. Sarah, this is everyone. They went around the circle introducing themselves. John, Marines, Iraq. Lisa, Navy, Somalia. Marcus, Army, Vietnam. Each one with their own story, their own scars, their own struggles. And each one looking at Sarah with understanding, not pity. They talked about jobs, about therapy, about the mundane struggles of civilian life. They laughed at shared experiences and nodded at shared pain. And slowly, Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, the tight, hard knot of isolation that had been there for months. These people understood. They'd been where she was. They knew what it meant to come home and feel lost. After the formal part ended, people milled around, talking and drinking bad coffee. Morrison appeared beside Sarah with Thor. How are you doing? Better than I expected. Sarah looked around the room. This is good, this helps. It gets better, give it a few weeks, you'll know everyone. Give it a few months, you'll be helping the new people who come in scared. He paused. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. The VA here is looking for a medical liaison, someone to help veterans navigate the system, connect them with resources, advocate for their care. It's part-time to start, but it could go full-time. And they specifically want someone who's been through the system, who understands what it's like. Sarah's heart skipped. Are you serious? Dead serious. I recommended you. Your interview is next Tuesday if you want it. Yes, I want it. Morrison grinned. Good, because these vets need someone like you. Someone who's been there, who understands, who'll fight for them the way you fought for yourself in that courtroom. Sarah felt tears threatening again. Thank you for everything. Thank me by showing up next Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and by taking that job and helping other people who are where you were. He scratched Thor's ears. That's how we heal, Sarah, not by doing it alone, but by doing it together. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the VA hospital cafeteria wearing business casual clothes and a visitor badge that read, Add medical liaison. Her left hand still trembled sometimes, but she'd learned to work around it. She'd learned a lot of things in 3 months. She'd learned that healing wasn't linear. Some days were good, some days were hard, but slowly the good days started to outnumber the bad. She'd learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was courage. She'd learned that her service hadn't ended when she left the Army. It had just taken a different form. The Thorntons had pleaded no contest to assault charges, receiving probation, community service, and mandatory anger management classes. It wasn't jail time, but it was accountability. And more importantly, it was a public record that would follow them. Sarah had testified at their sentencing, had looked them in the eyes and had said her piece. And then she'd walked away, leaving them in her past where they belonged. Now she helped veterans navigate the system that had once seemed so overwhelming to her. She made phone calls, filled out paperwork, connected people with resources. She listened to their stories and told them they mattered. And every Thursday, she went to the support group, where Morrison and Thor were always waiting. The cafeteria door opened, and Morrison walked in with Thor at his side. They'd just come from a therapy session with a young Marine who'd lost both legs in Syria. Morrison looked tired but satisfied. "How'd it go?" Sarah asked. "Good, he's struggling, but he's fighting. Reminds me of someone else I know." Morrison grabbed a coffee. "Hey, there's someone I want you to meet next week. Army Ranger just got discharged, dealing with a TBI. Could use someone who understands what he's going through." "I'll be here." "I know you will," Morrison smiled. "You always are." Thor moved to Sarah's side, pressing against her leg the way he always did, and she reached down to scratch his ears. The big Malinois leaned into her touch, his tail wagging. "He really does love you," Morrison observed. "The feeling's mutual." Sarah looked up at Morrison. "You know, you saved my life that day in the diner." "I just did what anyone should have done." "No, you did what a good person does. You saw someone who needed help and you helped. You didn't have to keep helping, but you did. You didn't have to care, but you did." Sarah's voice was steady now, sure. "You reminded me that I mattered, and that changed everything." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "You would have found your way eventually." "Maybe, but it would have taken a lot longer and it would have hurt a lot more," she smiled. "So thank you for showing up, for being persistent, for not letting me disappear." "That's what we do, right? We don't leave anyone behind." "No," Sarah agreed, "we don't." Outside the window, the North Carolina sun was shining, and somewhere in the building, veterans were healing, were fighting, were surviving. And Sarah Chen, former Army medic, assault survivor, combat veteran, was right there with them doing the work that mattered. Because she mattered, and she would never forget it again.